will now call to order the study session meeting of January 30th, 2023. Members of the public are invited to attend in-person city council meetings in council chambers on the lower level of City Hall. Public access to tonight's meeting is also available on the Local Government Access Channel 8 for Comcast subscribers, on the city's YouTube channel online, and by telephone using the call-in numbers posted on the meeting agenda. Will the city clerk call the roll?
Mayor Leidy is absent. Mayor Pro Tem Whitkovich.
Here.
Councilmember Jaramillo.
Here.
Councilmember Kondo.
Here.
Councilmember Lukeman Hiramasa.
Here.
Councilmember Goff.
Here.
Councilmember Brown.
Here.
Councilmember Walker.
Here.
Thank you.
Thank you. First item on the agenda is Safety Sensitive Zone Program. City Manager Guyer will present this item to council.
Good evening, Mayor Pro Tem and members of council and those that are virtual. This will be a joint presentation this evening with Chief May, myself, and our Public Works Director, Kent Kisselman, along with Corey Hoffman, our city attorney. We're pleased to present the proposed safety sensitive zone ordinance to you this evening. We're doing so after council direction back in November to bring forward a draft ordinance. The one thing that you'll notice is you have more than a draft ordinance. You have what I would consider a draft program. For your consideration tonight, we took a proactive step forward and gave you other elements of what a program could look like. That way you could really wrap your heads around what it could look like in addition to the ordinance piece in terms of implementation. So we're going to walk through a few pieces of the program tonight for your consideration. We did go ahead and update the 2022 year-end traffic citation and speeding citation data, so you have that as a reference point. We're also going to talk through the specifics of the ordinance itself, and Corey's going to handle that piece. We have proposed 4 safety-sensitive zone areas for your consideration that we'll dive into and talk about the recommendation for your consideration tonight. We also have an implementation timeline, as well as a community outreach, all of that said, it's all subject to your input and feedback, and things can be tweaked. So in terms of traffic citations, these 2 slides probably look familiar because we did share them with you back in November. You see year-end data there in terms of the total number of traffic citations and then the breakdown specific to speeding. In terms of the 2022 year-end figure over 2021, we did have an increase in 321 citations. And then in terms of 2021 over 2020, we had an increase of 386 citations. So really the intent of sharing this slide and the next slide that I'll share with you is to really show a baseline of here's where we're at based on our current efforts. And much of tonight's discussion is about how can we do more to address the challenges we have with speeding traffic specific to our residential areas. There we go. And so the next slide breaks it down specific to the violation, the degree of the violation over the posted speed limit. So this slide gives you a deeper dive into, if you look at the 2022 data and you look the miles per hour 10 to 19, you can see the number of 1,208 violations within that area, and that really follows from 2021 and then even 2020 in terms of what we're seeing in terms of violations. So I'm going to turn it over to Corey to talk about the proposed ordinance.
Heather, real quick.
Yes.
Councilmember Kondo?
Yes, Mayor Pro Tem. Just a question. Can we go back to the prior slide?
Sure.
So when I look between 2021 and 2022, it's kind of interesting. Clearly, you have a new road there, the 1 to 4 miles per hour. So it adds 5 lines there on that 2022. But what really shocked me was, if you look at the 10 to 19 mile per hour citation from 2021 to 10 to 19 mile per hour citation for 2022. It's just, it looked, that jump, I just wanted to make sure there wasn't any transposition error in building that slide. That is the right number, right? 1,208?
That's correct.
Okay.
So yeah, that's the correct number. And that 10 to 19 is the area where the majority of speeders are, right? So that's the area of enforcement. It's where our officers are the best trained to make that visual identification of a vehicle speeding, because that's part of the requirement to make that visual inspection and estimate of a vehicle traveling beyond the speed limit. And then with their training and the technology of the radar and or LiDAR, they're able to get into that sweet spot pretty well. When you get into 5 to 9 or even the 1 to 4s, an officer has to be really pretty close to a vehicle to make that reference of whether or not they're speeding a similar amount of speed over the speed limit, especially the 1 to 4. The 5 to 9 gets a little tricky as well, much more difficult than the 10 to 19. When you see a car moving up the road with other cars in contrast, it's usually very easy to make that observation. And it is a requirement with the case law in Colorado to make that visual estimate prior to radar being used as a tool as well. So it's those two pieces.
So follow on, would you say that our officers are biased towards pulling over somebody if they're for sure 10 miles over? And maybe that also explains why it's, you got that hump there because
You'll
maybe-
never get me to come up here and say our officers are biased. All right? They do a great job. And 10 to 19 is that sweet spot where they're probably the most comfortable and trained to recognize that speed beyond a speed limit, right?
Okay.
So, yeah, that's where
May-
that's the sweet
I
spot.
didn't mean to say bias in a bad sort of way, but rather, perhaps maybe it's the human, the-
Let me get into the weeds on something the deputy chief said, because it might help.
yes,
In order to, under existing Colorado law related to how you prosecute a speeding violation, there is a 5 mile per hour delta that is built into the training. So someone does a visual estimate, and it's the visual estimate that triggers the ability to then put your radar or your laser device. And your radar or laser device is required to be plus or minus 5 miles per hour of your visual estimate.
okay,
So by definition, that makes it really tough on a 1 to 4 over.
Yes.
Because you're in that area of question already. Difficult, but certainly not impossible in the 5 to 9. But when you get to the 10 to 19, the visual estimate is easier because you are seeing it relative to what you know the speed limit is, relative to what other traffic is doing. You often see someone passing or going faster than everybody else, and then you can go through that. But when you prove a speeding ticket that is with radar or laser, you go through the elements of the case. And what I just described is some of those elements, including that visual estimate. So from a prosecution perspective and from a prosecuting or winning on a ticket case, the officer knows that as well because their training says they have that plus or minus 5 miles an hour as part of their analysis.
yeah. I mean, I was thinking it's a human factors element too, because, I mean, judging speed by eyeball or trying to estimate that on a straight road as opposed to a curved road, where maybe your eyes are playing tricks on you, seems to be a factor. But, okay, thank you. I appreciate that.
For Councilmember Lukeman Hiramassa's benefit, and probably for your benefit too, Councilmember Brown, as we move through the presentation, I'm going to say the name of each slide so you can follow, because there's a technology component which they see something different than you all see. So we're on background and research.
So as it relates to this draft ordinance, in the late 1990s, Town of Parker had similar concerns related actually to their downtown area. So not a residential area, but an area with significant interaction between pedestrians and traffic. And so they came up with this model. Back then, it is still in place today. The only thing on the slide, it says a different tool than existing school zones, and that is absolutely correct. But I would suggest to you that the policy idea between a safety-sensitive zone, or that's behind a safety-sensitive zone, is remarkably similar to both school zones and construction zones. The reason you have school zones is because you've got children. The reason you've got construction zones is because you've got workers and you've got oftentimes narrow lanes and you're trying to keep speeds down. What is different about the safety-sensitive zone from school zones or construction zones is that it takes away the discretion to lower the fine. So within the draft ordinance, unlike school zones and construction zones, it actually has an additional tool of saying, you're always able to plea bargain the points, but you can't plea bargain the fine. And so over time, the idea is certainly that people know that there is a financial disincentive, if you will, to speed in a safety-sensitive zone. And the hope is that that trickles down through the community and over time is the best incentive. But the idea is to identify those areas that are truly have that risk of interaction between vehicle and pedestrian based on the nature of the area. And the finding by the council that it is worthy of a safety-sensitive zone designation needs to be, and the legal term is rational. And so there needs to be something council is hanging its hat on. It doesn't need to be scientifically provable, but it has to be something that someone could say, yeah, I get it. And so there has to be at least enough focus that it is on certain areas. If it were citywide, then I would suggest you should just put mandatory double penalties on speeding throughout the city and not have safety-sensitive zones. But that's not the problem, as we understand it, the city's seeking to solve. So that's sort of the origins of the ordinance. You identify the areas separately, and they are subject to the mandatory penalty. You have signs at the beginning of the zone, signs at the end, very similar to school zones and construction zones.
Councilmember Jaramillo?
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. Since we're already in the weeds, I figured I'd ask this question. Issue that I have too is mainly on Malley Drive. I mean, Chief was there and we had our ward meeting. He saw all the people speeding by. And it was in the summertime, and this is when I don't think they really enforce school zones. Is that true? Because I want to say that, that's probably one of the main areas where there's issues in Ward 2 is Malley Drive. And, if it's after school or the summertime, it seems like the seasonality of crime, there's way more speeders in the summer. And so that's a big concern for a lot of my neighbors.
And that's an excellent way in which a safety-sensitive zone is certainly broader potentially than a school zone. Because you may be in the summer, playgrounds are open, kids may congregate to the schools, the safety or the school zone may not be activated, school's not in session, but there's still kids there. So the safety-sensitive zone helps accomplish that.
Great, yeah, that's why I wanted to have the consideration for Malley Drive. When we look at this map, you notice Ward 2 only has a small stretch along 112th and Larson Lane. So I wanted to, bring that to light since there's definitely a lack of consideration for any other areas. So I figured I would voice that, and maybe even Irma Drive. I hear a lot from my neighbors too about speeding on Irma. So figured I'd throw it out there since the conversation was going that direction.
And we appreciate that, Councilmember Jaramillo. We'll share the intention behind the streets that you see on the map. Certainly, we fully acknowledge there are more streets that could be on the map. This is a recommended starting point that's aligned with traffic unit capacity and overall staff capacity in terms of getting the zones stood up. A big piece of the conversation for council's consideration tonight is, do you want to move forward with those 4 streets? That's part of the discussion and feedback that we're hoping to have with you. So we'll circle back to your comment and suggestion.
We have some more questions. Councilmember Brown?
We love it when I struggle with technology. I'm actually gonna circle back onto what Councilmember Jaramillo was saying. How were these streets defined? I don't remember being involved in previous discussions where this is the street we're going to talk about, because I'm standing right beside Jay. We hit that small section of 112th Place, and that's probably the third or fourth biggest area we have. I'm just wondering who made the decision
Yeah.
to hit those areas.
Happy to answer your question, Councilmember Brown. Tonight is the first night we're sharing this information. There has not been a prior conversation about the streets. So in a few slides, I'll get to the rationale in taking the draft ordinance and then applying it to the streets. And the recommendation staff is making, these don't have to be the streets. They're open
Okay.
for feedback and
now-
conversation. So this isn't set in stone.
Okay.
I thought it was better to have this conversation with streets for you all to react to. And to also save the step in saying, well, we'll bring streets back to you. So that way you can, in a couple slides ahead, you'll see how we're applying the criteria of the safety sensitive ordinance. So it's the first night you're seeing it, Councilmember Brown.
Okay, and so all the streets are up for negotiation, for lack of a
Yes.
better word.
Yes.
And is it your intent to only put it out to, what'd you say, 4 different areas for right now to test it out?
The staff's recommendation is 4 areas, 1 in each ward, based on our current capacity, not only on the public works side, but then also the enforcement side with a traffic unit. And then evaluate those 4 zones for a period of a year and come back to council. And then next year, in essence, June, you'll see this on a future slide, we'll come back to you with recommendations in terms of what other streets could be added. That's also a conversation that council would be involved in. How did we perform in terms of the zone working? Did it work? Did it not work? And we'll talk about the data measures that we think we can use to gauge that.
So are you saying you would test it for a year, then come back and make the, changes or adding more people to it? So it's a 2-year implementation or a 1 year?
Well, it'd be a 1-year trial period with the first 4 streets that are designated, the first 4 zones that are designated, excuse me. So, and that's the recommendation. If council says, no, we don't like that, Heather, we want to be able to add more streets, I have to have the ability to work with staff and figure out how we can effectively execute on the implementation plan.
Okay, all right. I'm gonna keep my mouth shut and I'll ask questions later.
Okay.
Councilmember Walker?
Mr. Hoffman, I just have a quick question. I just wanted to clarify, this would only be for speeding. So let's say there's a stop sign and someone runs a stop sign in the safety sensitive zone, that fine is not doubled, correct?
No, it is. It's all moving
It's every moving
violations.
violation,
All
okay.
moving violations.
Thank you, sir.
Yep. And in fact, violations like a stop sign are a heck of a lot easier to prove.
Thank you, sir.
Councilmember Jaramillo?
Thank you again, Mayor Pro Tem. So, Becky, I don't want to speak for both of us, but would you say, like, to moving forward on this, would you rather our attention be put on, let's say, Malley Drive or Irma instead of the 112th? I feel like it would,
Any part of the city but the 112th, but we can do that as a sidebar if that works for you.
Well,
I just
can
feel
I
like-
suggest, I
ahead.
don't mean to interrupt you.
but,
Let me get through the next few slides.
Yeah.
okay.
And we'll get to the map, I promise.
Yeah, I just want to
So,
like keep some
I-
promises when I was knocking doors
I
and my
understand.
neighbors about Malley and Irma.
This
and
is
it's
the
like,
first conversation, so staff wants feedback on what the right streets are. So if you and Councilmember Brown and Councilmember Jaramillo, and this is true for any of our wards, if you see the street that's recommended, the zone area that's recommended, you say, no, I don't like this one, then we have to have a conversation about why not and why the other street. But let me get through the slides where we focus on applying the criteria, and I'll help you get there.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. So the next slide is talking about the program goals. These are the outlined program goals. I'm not going to read all of them to you. Key elements of the program include deterring speeding. With the mandatory doubling of fines, we hope that this is a financial deterrent for the public. The areas that we're going to establish as zones need to constitute high traffic volume and/or dangerous speeds in combination with pedestrian traffic. So that's language specifically from the draft ordinance, and that's really the heart of the criteria that we're working with. This ordinance will be enacted. This effort will be enacted by ordinance, excuse me, and it's gonna be a two-step process. So you'll have the typical ordinance process, so you have a first reading, second reading, if we receive council direction this evening. And then the zones need to be designated by resolution. And so you'll see later on the slide that I have on the timeline, that that's another step to the process. So one thing council can consider this evening is if you all are supportive and provide consensus on the ordinance, we can keep that moving forward. And then if there's still more conversation that we need to have around the actual zones that get set by council, then we can build that into the schedule, and that can be an additional meeting. Over time, council can modify the zones. So to the earlier example, when I was talking to Councilmember Brown about adding additional zones, you can do that via resolution. That's via resolution, not an ordinance action. So next year, if council says we want to add these 4 additional zones, or 8, whatever that number is, then you can do that, and that action would be via resolution. In terms of the significance of the zones, there's 4 pieces that we want to highlight here. We're really focused on trying to change motorist behavior. In an earlier slide, we mentioned how this tool is a different tool than school zones. It's also a different tool than our No Need for Speed program, which is often focused on physical improvements to the roadway. I mentioned the financial deterrent for the motorist, also enhancing and equipping our current traffic unit with an additional tool that we don't have. This is a program that isn't widely used in other communities. So if you were to ask me the question of show me the list of other communities that have used this program, I'm beyond town of Parker, I'm not gonna be able to really share a list with you. So this is, I think, a unique approach that North Glen's modeling after the town of Parker. And perhaps in the future, if you decide to move forward with the program, other cities may choose to follow suit as well. This program, the zones themselves are gonna be required to be visibly signed. And Kent will walk you through a couple of slides in a few minutes that show you the mock-up of the signage that we'll use for this program. And the next slide is gonna talk about the safety-sensitive zone fines, and Chief May is gonna walk us through those.
Good evening. Actually, this is one of those things where through the courts, you can see the speeds 5 to 9. You see the points that go on those tickets. Then you see the current municipal court fine, and then what the safety-sensitive zone fine will be. Again, the main purpose of these zones is to reduce speeding. And again, through those high fines, we hope to see that. So you can see it's almost, doubling except for the 20 plus where it goes to 250 to 500. That's not bad math. That's just, Corey could probably explain it better, but that's probably best practice. It's not statute driven, but it is best practice to keep it under that $500 mark. So that's why it's at $499. Go ahead.
And council, probably 2 years ago now, decriminalized much of its municipal ordinances, and this is consistent with decriminalizing. And in this context, what this means is that an offender would not be subject to a jury trial for this type of offense.
And just like Councilman Walker talked about earlier is, moving violations and also the stop sign violations. They are all included into this area. And then it's mandatory fines, right? So they can't go in there and negotiate. The judge has that fine, that's what it'll be, but she can have, where she can do the points and, reduce those if she wants to. And then, just like we just talked about, the fine can exceed $4.99, so.
Okay, moving on to the safety-sensitive zone criteria. So this portion of the presentation, I want to say on the onset, took a lot of conversation internally to try to figure out, we had the framework of the ordinance, how do we apply that criteria that you see under that first bullet of the high traffic volume and/or dangerous speeds in combination with pedestrian traffic. The intent, our understanding of the intent is to focus on residential areas based on the fact that much of our other enforcement efforts are focused on high accident areas along major arterials and collector streets. So the developed approach that we have for council's consideration tonight is to focus on location in and around parks and trails. And the reason being, when you look at the map and we have the parks identified, you start to see areas that we know pedestrian and bicyclist traffic exists, that there's crosswalks, there's proximity to schools resulting in increased traffic, and then existing school zones. So Ward 2 is a perfect example of having multiple schools. You've got the 3 where you have school zones, as Councilmember Jaramillo mentioned, north of Malley. And then, like in Ward 4, for example, you have the high school and Melody Drive, which we'll talk more about in terms of why we're highlighting that. So that's the basis of how we're advancing this, and this is all open for discussion and feedback from council tonight. So the next slide is focused on the zone impact. So we're recommending that we start with one zone in each of the 4 council wards. And again, I've mentioned that this is based on staff capacity and that of both Public Works and the traffic unit based on its existing staffing level. And Chief can talk more about the staffing level of the traffic unit in a couple slides in a minute. We recommend measuring the speeds before we install the zone, make the zone official, call it the launch of the zone. And that gives us baseline traffic data based on volume of cars plus the speed of the vehicles. And we want that so that way we know when we measure, we're recommending measuring at the 6-month mark and then ultimately at that annual year mark to see if there's a decrease in speed, because that's the goal, is to decrease speed beyond the enforcement measures. We do believe, and we've had quite a bit of discussion, certainly we can discuss this with council, we don't necessarily recommend that the effectiveness of the overall program is measured by the number of zones. I think this is a type of program where each zone has different attributes to it beyond the criteria that I just shared. And so this type of program is going to require analysis on each zone area. And, we may see some common trends among the 4 zones that we initially launch. We may not. That would be yet to be determined.
Councilmember Brown?
Heather, I'm sorry, that didn't last very long, but I've looked through the slides. I've gone ahead. I'm not seeing how large a zone is. Is a zone just a block on on a through street, or is a zone like a school zone where it's from one part of the neighborhood to the other part of the neighborhood?
Councilmember Brown, this is Corey. It would depend on the zone itself, and that's part of the evaluation that council would undertake, is where that interplay is. So it may be very consistent with the parameters of a school zone When you think of a school zone, it tries to capture kids going to and from school. So we're gonna have to look at each area and identify that. It's not one block or 2 blocks, it's what the circumstances dictate.
And we,
Perfect answer.
good.
I liked it.
And I'll just piggyback onto that, Councilmember Brown. We provided you with a high-level map. We can come back to council with a map specific to each zone area that's in greater detail at a future date, if you'd like that.
Councilmember Kondo?
Yes, thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. Just my question on that map is you do have some red hash lines on certain streets. And I couldn't quite decipher what the meaning of that is. It's not on the legend. Can you just explain that, please?
I'm sorry, Councilmember Kondo, that's a great question. That's the zone itself that we're recommending.
Okay.
So when you look at the cyclist pedestrian interaction and how that road follows, that's Community Center Drive.
Okay, gotcha. Thank
Yeah,
you.
thank you. I apologize for that mistake.
I guess I've got a question about measuring the speeds before launch. Are we going to kind of be intentional about when that happens, you know, early in the morning or in the evening when people are coming home? So I know the data that we got about Fox Run Parkway was from 10 a.m. to noon.
It'll
And-
be during peak
Okay.
travel times, yes.
Okay. Thanks.
Yep, great question and feedback. Okay. Now we're gonna talk about enforcement within the zones, and Chief's gonna take this one.
All right. So one thing, just like Heather said, currently we have 2 traffic officers on our traffic team. When we're fully staffed, that number will go up to 4. Also, again, traffic and safety is the responsibility of all police officers out there in the patrol cars, right? So we're not handling calls or, you know, responding to calls for service. They should be out there, not only in the other directed patrol things, but also if they see violations, that they should take some action. The management of this program and staffing needs of the traffic unit will be assessed annually. So again, when the needs, if there's more added, we have to reassess how many traffic officers we have to actually be effective and efficient into dealing with these zones. We'll continue our enforcement of high accident locations, school zones, again, those areas that are complaint-driven, really doing a lot of community education. Again, there's one thing, no need for speed is also out there. So, you know, our community's taken a lot of steps to try to really reduce speeds. And again, this ordinance is another tool that we can really, you know, use out there to make us a little more efficient, right? So, and Kent will get into it a little bit about some, you know, it's gonna be data collection for us too. So we'll see the results. So we're gonna bring back a lot of data within a year to show you how effective that was, so.
Mayor Pro Tem Witkovich, I'm gonna share one clarification Deputy Chief and I were just discussing. The radar collectors collect data 24/7. The issue that we had with the initial data collection and observations that we did by the PD on Fox Run Parkway was that we weren't hitting those peak travel time hours. So there will be alignment with all of that, but I just wanted to clarify the capability of the radar and what data we'll be measuring. Moving on to measure of success, please feel free if you have any suggestions about possible additional measures of success. We'd love to hear your perspectives. This is a draft list that we came up with. Beyond evaluating the program annually based on the actual zone data, we would use the average speed data before and after the zone was implemented with the radar signs. Kent will talk you through the signage in a couple slides, but within the midpoint of each zone, we're recommending that we put one of those flashing radar signs that collect volume and speed. So we'll have that data. Now before the program's launched, we'll use a different type of radar that's temporary that will set up and not be very visible. So not the tubes on the street, but the radar that we typically attach to the poles, try to hide them, so motorists don't see that we're measuring. The tubes, are pretty common when we're doing speed count in a lot of different areas, but we've been able to advance that technology. And so, because we have seen the impact of having them visible to the motorists. We're hoping to see a shift in perception of residents, and, we don't have this quantified beyond that. I would say we'd see a reduction in number of complaints by residents. I think that this is something that we're gonna really have to be in communication with each other, and I'm gonna know based on the complaints that you all are receiving that come to my level, as well as complaints that come into the city directly to staff. So you see that piece there. Visibility of enforcement efforts. So we have the number of traffic citations, and I've got moving violations included there, just to really emphasize that it's not just speeding, it's moving violations as well. And then an increase in the number of speeding violations. I think one of the things we would hope to be able to do is by zone, be able to identify the citations specific to each zone, be able to break them apart in terms of speeding, and then moving violations to really be able to wrap our heads around the inappropriate motorist behavior taking place and strategize on what do we need to do differently, if anything, or is it working? And we've seen a sustained decrease in speeding, and we go ahead and just continue to press onward with the zone, and that it's proving to be impactful. So the next couple slides are on safety-sensitive zone signage, and Kent can walk you through these.
Good evening. Thank you for having us this evening. So we'll start at the far right on this. This is the actual sign that is in the Main Street in Parker. So then if you go back to, the beginning, we would recommend having a warning sign, and that's the one, the speed safety sensitive zone ahead. And then the MUTCD requires that, based on the speed and the parameters, a minimum of 100 feet until the zone starts. And then when the zone starts, that's where the zone begins and the fines can begin. Not between the beginning one and that 100 feet. So, and then the zone can vary based on, the length of whatever segment we're looking at. And then we will obviously end the zone, so then folks know that the safety-sensitive zone has then in fact ended. And just to touch on what Corey had mentioned earlier with the background slide, with similar to school zones. So the school zones, there's like 5 things that we do for the criteria for school zones. The school population, which is at high school, junior high, middle school, elementary. The transportation issues, is there walking, buses, drop-off? Physical setting, is it in a residential area? Education issues, is there a crossing guard that the school provides? Law enforcement, are there posted speeds around there? So again, there's similarities between the school zones and the safety-sensitive zones. And so we want to kind of, utilize those tools. They're not exactly the same, but in the manual on uniform traffic control devices, there's not a safety-sensitive zone section. So we're applying the rules of law or the rules of the signs in accordance with those school zone areas. So that's where you see the 100 feet minimum. And based, just background, if you want the 100 feet, so at 25 miles an hour, a warning sign, the minimum is 100 feet. It's actually 35 and below, so we're well within there. And then if you go to the, let's see.
Wait, just while we're on that slide, just one piece of information. Council may be aware, and if not, if you look at the 25 mile an hour zone sign or any speed limit sign in the city, there's actually kind of an invisible line across the pavement at that location, and that's where the zone, that safety or that speed limit starts. So when they're doing enforcement, they're gonna pick a spot after they've crossed the sign, which is part of the elements you have to prove, is that you're in the zone, you see the sign is upright and unobstructed, you see the speed limit sign, and then you're in the zone.
And as Heather mentioned, these would be, we'd want to order some of these signs. We would order one for each zone. There's not a reason to put it on both sides because the data collection does the entire street, both sides, so. But the ones we've been ordering lately, like the one out on Melody, they do collect the data and they do collect, the volume of traffic as well. And that's 24/7, so we're able to pull that data when necessary and then, gather that information. But there is like a 4-month lead time on these. So it'll take a bit, but we do want that in the middle of the zone or somewhere in there, so we are tracking actual speeds through the zone. Yep.
Any questions on those last two slides?
Councilmember
yes.
Jaramillo?
Yeah, thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. So approximately, just to give people an idea and myself an idea, how wide is 100 feet when let's say like an average house is at about 100 feet? Do we say that? Like, let's say say you're going down, let's say Malley Drive, since I talked about it earlier. If we have it posted, let's say right at Clarkson, and then, or right when Washington start, where you go into Malley from Washington, would that width, let's say that one house on the corner and then the street, would that be about 100 feet? Like, I'm just trying to gauge like where.
Cars are approximately 20 feet long, so you can say 5 car lengths. I mean,
Okay.
could give you an idea, but
Okay,
in your scenario, I wouldn't be able to, I can't envision where that is, so I apologize for that.
okay, yeah, just trying to visualize where would be a good spot to place one of these, on one of the warning signs, and then where it would be enforced.
And we've talked about it, that, we did do the design for the school zone system, and Malley was one of the ones that we did the design on. So that's in the queue for construction around the entire school system of Malley. So that's a larger project than a safety-sensitive zone, which is a general straight stretch. The school zone is all around the school. And so that's already the design is completed for Malley Elementary, and we're just waiting to do construction on that.
Okay, great. So, in addition to that, would we be able to expand in that same area? Let's say Washington to Irma? Would we be able to do that?
I'm not gonna pick the areas right now, so I think that's,
Potentially.
that's for a future discussion and consideration based on the criteria that we've kind of looked at.
Thank
I
you.
think one of the things we probably need to do is talk about getting the school zone the design in front of council. Typically, we do that and have in the past. So prior to the construction council, you will see what the recommended design is. And then it's really a conversation of, does it make sense? I understand your comment about, well, in the summer months, and there's not traffic enforcement being done, it's effective when there's enforcement being done in the school zone area. But in the off-school months, what does that look like? So there's the potential to do both, but I think we'd have to figure it out and talk about it. And we can bring back more detailed maps of this is what each area is gonna look like. We're going to put a sign in this location. I mean, one of the things that we have to think about, not for a tonight discussion, is the location of signs where we have public right-of-way in our parks and along our trails. It's easier to pick a location. A ward like Ward 2 is tougher because there's right-of-way that carries over into front yards of properties. And so that's where we would need to work with property owners, make sure, even though it's our right-of-way, make sure they're supportive of putting the sign that we need to put in. This is true for Ward 3. Over and around the Grant area, we've had challenges when we made improvements to Stuckey and installed signage. We had some pushback by residents in terms of installing signs that said school zone ahead. So we'll be very thoughtful and collaborative in terms of that piece related to signage.
Councilmember Brown?
I just wanted to say, Heather, I think I had a light bulb moment. We're not going to want to place these in school zones because the fines are already doubled in the school zones, right?
Correct.
If you through there. So we would want to think, and that's what one of the reasons Malley wouldn't be like our first choice because of the school zone there, right? It already is taken up a large portion.
In theory, I just, off the top of my head, I don't know what the design improvements recommend. So Kent and I can look at that this week.
Okay.
And I'll be able to better wrap my head around and confidently say yes or no to that. But
Because my-
you're right about the concept and the application.
Right, I mean, then it would make sense, because you can't have everything be a safety zone. It would make sense to stay off of Malley and let that still stay with the other project that we have going for Malley.
Yes.
Okay, all right. Boom, blew away. Thank you.
You're welcome. Okay, so let's pull out the map and talk about the recommended zones. And Kent, if you want to come up here and help me with this. So we'll start with Ward 1. So we're recommending Fox Run Parkway, and the reason we're recommending this is because of the speeding issues we've had on this roadway. We do know that we're gonna improve the roadway, stripe it with the Connect North Glen plan. We have not been able to implement that yet, so those improvements will still move forward regardless of implementing the safety sensitive zone, so it'll be an added measure. So that's the first recommended street, and I'll stop there, and we're happy to answer any questions.
Is it both sections of the red?
Yeah, we kind of ran out of time with the mapping, so this isn't really a true map. We kind of colored on top of there. And apologies for not having that in the legend, but, yeah, so we would look at that and see if it could encompass the whole thing, but really, we're looking at the park area, on each one in the open space and treating that very similar with the parks and the trails for the high volume interaction between the pedestrians and the vehicles. So, it could make sense to have a segment by the open space in the park and then go up and around the corner and then do that little park section as well. So there could actually be two, or we could combine it into one. Yet to be determined as we do some design on the finalization of what the zones are.
But we would, in essence, be looking at what is south of 112th, what is north of 104th along that roadway and build the zone with that macro parameter.
Okay. Councilmember Walker, put your hand up.
I did, I was just, well, Kent kind of touched on it, that we can, because there's a massive or a three-way stop there that's right outside of these red areas, but it's still along the open space right there, and so that's a big hot spot too for blowing through a stop sign. So we can get to all that later, so this looks good so far. Thank you.
Now we'll move to Ward 2, and we've heard some initial feedback from Councilmember Jaramillo and Councilmember Brown. So part of why we advanced the Larson Lane in 112th Place is because it is a straightaway location in proximity to a park. And so it'd be an additional traffic calming measure. So again, anchoring back to the park and the trail piece, that's where we're trying to keep that linchpin.
And I'll just add, we have the speed humps on Claude that come down and wrap around at 112th Place, and then we have the raised median across the Highline Canal. And then we go down and we're adding traffic calming improvements currently at 112th and Clarkston up and around there. And then at Irma and Malley, we're doing those improvements as well. That contractor's on board and doing those improvements at Irma and Malley that we discussed, a couple months ago. So as you kind of take that area and you funnel it down to the park, then, it makes sense to include a safety sensitive zone in that area because you have the other traffic calming measures north of those areas that are capturing the speeding but there's nothing really in front of the park. So the park is where the interaction is between the pedestrians and the vehicles. We just improved the basketball courts over there. You have the 112th now, just right there. And so that's where we thought that it was best utilized in that area with the pedestrians.
Councilmember Brown?
Thank you very much, Mayor Pro Tem. So here's my thing. Now that the light bulb's gone off, I kind of understand the Larson Lane thing. Why go that way? I understand the park. all that good stuff. Some of that's probably also covered with the school zone, but I can't remember. I'm trying to visualize it. My problem is I would like to see the traffic information that was done on there as far as flows, tickets, speed limits, all that good stuff that we did for the Safe Street campaign. And then I'd like to see if Jay and I can dwindle down to two other choices. We'll make one final decision, but to two other choices that would like you to provide data to us for. I get that it's by the park, and Jay, please feel free to disagree with me. I don't know if that's where we're going to get the most bang for our buck, honestly. I know that the neighbors complain about them whipping around the road, but I'm not so sure that's where we're going to get the most bang for our buck. So that's all I have to say.
Councilmember Jaramillo?
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. I agree that we won't get the most bang for our buck in that area. I do know that there is a speeding problem there. I mean, back from playing basketball at Larson Park, growing up, not as many people go there as they used to. You know, it's a little pocket park, but not too many people utilize it. And I understand that the decision was probably made because of the no need for speed, that, you know, everything that we had going on in 2022 in that area. And they are going to be putting, they're still putting the speed bumps along where like those, I forget what they were called, those pylons. Are we still doing that?
Yes.
On 112? Okay. So it's already being addressed, where honestly, I feel like the most effective part, I feel, and I'm gonna, you know, if there's anything I do like the whole time I'm on council is like make Malley Drive a safer place, because we're having you know, children there every day. You have people after school hours go and walk their dog there. You know, it's not like, it's when school's out is when it's the worst. And when you go down the line of everything that we mentioned about how to be most effective, you know, there's a bus stop there for 3 different high schools, Northglenn, Thornton, and Mountain Range, I believe. And proximity to school, it's a little stretch of road that I feel like we can, that, you know, that's one place where I just feel like there's like that's the most large need in Ward 2. I just don't feel like that section right there is very effective, because it's already getting the traffic calming and all the efforts that we made in 2022. And just for this to be up for debate in a year from now, I just feel like is kind of like we weren't even in the conversation, were we, Becky?
No.
See, that's
No, today's their our first conversation.
right.
But
So
I think it's important to remember, Jay, that we have a separate sidebar project not included on this for Irma and Malley.
May I make
So-
a suggestion?
Yeah.
How about we do this with Ward 2 specifically, and if this becomes true for Ward 3, Ward 4, let me know. I will make a commitment to meeting with the two of you and staff. We can go through the elements of the school zone, proposed school zone improvements for Malley, and we can look at some other areas. And then we can hear your feedback and bring something back to council as a whole that the two of you are comfortable with advancing. Does that sound good? Because I don't think we're gonna figure it out tonight, and that's not the intent of tonight. It was really to propose locations, gauge your comfort level, and I clearly hear that you're not comfortable with this location, so I think we've got some behind-the-scenes work to do, and then we can figure out what both Councilmember Brown and you agree to that would be the most effective. So we would not be waiting for a year. We will, the safety sensitive zone designations will not come forward unless I have consensus from council on those designations. Does that make sense?
yes. And just Becky, I know when you had your light bulb epiphany, like the thing is though, it's not just you know, that it's a school zone. I mean, it's year round, and you know, you drive the street, you know, Malley Drive to and from when we do council. I mean, you know that, and I mean, it's not just during,
We'll talk.
it's not during, 8:00 AM to 3:00 PM. Like, that's the only time. It's, it's, during the summer, and it's late at night or early in the morning when people are going to work. That's when it's the worst. So, I mean, just saying, oh, it's in a school zone, I just don't think that's enough to,
I don't think I'm being clear enough, but I don't want to talk up all the time tonight. But I don't think I'm being clear enough in how I'm explaining it to you. And that's
okay,
my-
well, we'll talk and we'll get this all,
Absolutely.
we'll get it all figured out.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Moving on to Ward 3, we're recommending the red hash mark that follows from 120th down to Malley Drive for Community Center Drive. Ward 3 council members' feedback.
Sounds great. I've gotten complaints from people living in those apartments about speeding on that street. And I know was it like, within the last week, saw an accident at the intersection of Malley and Community Center. Something needs to happen.
Councilmember Condo?
Yeah, I'm in concurrence as well. The question in my mind, however, is can we extend the southern terminus of that safety zone over towards the Justice Center? Because it seems as though a lot of people tend to, at least what I observe in the mornings, is come out of the large apartment complexes and they're trying to get over to Huron. They do that left turn and they really race over that overpass over I-25. I don't know if that's doable or not.
I think the way the speeds are set up right now, that would be difficult because there's two different speed
Oh,
zones.
there is. Okay, gotcha. All right. Other than that, I am in concurrence.
I think once, once Odell Berry Park becomes a park, I think that'd be a good candidate to extend down, but it's 35 miles an hour over the bridge.
Gotcha. Thank you.
And it drops to 25, right? Okay.
And there's a whole new development that Brooke's working on that's going in there too.
Yep.
We don't know what that's gonna do. They're gonna be
All right.
changing medians, and there could be right-in and right-outs, and full movements yet to be determined, so.
Okay.
Where the Global Village Academy was.
Yep, understand.
Okay. And then Ward 4,
I know Councilmember Luke Minhira-Massa was having some tech issues.
okay. So we are proposing an area, not the entire length of Melody Drive, because we don't believe that it would meet the criteria. But given the proximity, and I know it's small, but it's just the concept, and we can come back with greater detailed maps. You'll see south of 104th, there's a crosswalk area where there's a trail connection, and then the proximity to the school. We believe this stretch is, I know that I get complaints about this stretch the most. I think, our overall traffic calming through the Connect North Glen improvements did help create a reduction in speed, but there is still a speeding problem. So we identified that area. Ken, I don't know if you want to say anything in addition to that.
Yeah, former council members have brought up that area specifically in that ward, that was an issue, but it really didn't qualify as part of a school zone, so our hands were really kind of tied. So again, making this connection and kind of the similarity, that it makes sense that high-volume crosswalk during the school season or session, really makes sense for that connectivity, and again, the interaction between pedestrians and vehicles specifically.
I'm sure you'll need to discuss further with council, or Ward 4 council members, but Shannon did share, she gets most complaints for Melody, but also 104th and Huron is bad. So I just want to pass that along.
Yeah, and 104th and Huron would be one of those arterial collector types roads where this wouldn't be that type of a program to work.
So that's an area that we want to have a traffic unit, and I believe they do. That's on our high accident area, as well as violations with moving violations and speeding. And that's on their radar. Okay, any additional feedback on the map at this point? Okay. So in terms of the draft implementation timeline that we're proposing, again, subject to change based on feedback, We're proposing that the ordinance continue to move forward. So first reading can take place on February 13th, second reading, public hearing on February 27th. We can add in an additional meeting date, and I believe based on feedback thus far, probably need to do that specific to the zone designations, the maps. And then the resolution could come forward for the zone designations on March 20th. I kind of ballparked where we would be at with adding that third meeting. And I think that's doable if council's receptive to that. For the actual program launch, as Kent mentioned, there's a 4-month lead time on the radar signs. And you'll see this in another slide forward, but most of the outreach work we're doing in-house in terms of the actual signage. We have an awesome sign shop and crew that'll take care of that work. And so it's the radar signs that we need to order, do the initial installation, of the signs, installation of the speed radar flashers, and that initial assessment, which we plan on about a 3-month window of time. Kent also reminded me it's hard to put signs in the ground when the ground's frozen, so, which seems to be more common these days. So the evaluation of the program at 1 year would be that ultimate annual evaluation, but based on the outline earlier, commitment would be to, on the onset of the program, 6-month, and then the annual piece. So in terms of community outreach, we've got a couple slides to talk you through. We did do a recap in the legislative recap column of the Connection newsletter going out in February. Is it already? It's hitting mailboxes now. Thank you, Diana. Letting the public, our residents, know that you're having this conversation tonight, so we don't want to miss that window of opportunity. We will include a cover story if we're provided consensus to move forward with the zone for the March connection, if the ordinance passes. We're recommending that direct mailers be sent to all the residents in and around the new safety-sensitive zones prior to the installation of signs, to let them know, hey, this program is coming, here's what it is, here's what it is not. And then use of temporary signage until we get permanent signage installed. So we don't have an exact idea of what that looks like, but that would be like a safety-sensitive zone coming dates of it. And then the other additional pieces would be to utilize our social media outlets, our website, in terms of promotion of implementation. We can integrate information through the upcoming ward meetings, because I know Diana's working with each of you to get those scheduled. We can include distribution of a flyer explaining the program. The one piece down at the bottom here that I have is we can hold a public meeting on the program in an open house format, where residents can learn more about the program, unless you say, no, we want to hold a program and we want to hold a meeting to talk about the program and see if the public supports it. That would be a completely different approach from how I've designed the program and presented it to you tonight. So I would need to know that, because that'll shift the timeline entirely. So again, to simplify it, if council says to me, we like the concept, we want to get public input on it, and then come back to us, then that would push out the entire timeline, probably by a good month to 2 months. If you say, we like the concept, let's move forward with the ordinance, and then do an open house so residents can learn about the program, we can approach it that way. And that's what I'm recommending, based on the significance in terms of this being a priority of council, also attending the ward meetings alongside with each of you, knowing that traffic on residential streets has been such a concern. I would recommend you go ahead and do more of an open house format, launch the program, get it going, because it's demonstrating that we're responsive and we're doing something about it, trying to.
Councilmember Brown?
Thank you. Heather, I agree with you 100%. I don't think this is an instance where we go out and seek community input on whether they think this is a great idea or not. In this particular instance, I think that we go with the fact that we have been listening to their cries for help with the safety, which is what we're really trying to address in these, and know that we were elected to do our best. And I don't think we want to take this out for so I don't think we want to take it out and have them help us write a policy or anything like that. I think we should do it on our own. We didn't tell them, we didn't get public input on whether we could, when we changed the policy on the cars that were racing on the streets, we didn't go out and get public input for that. Off my horse.
Councilmember Goff?
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. Yeah, I was just pretty much going to echo the similar sentiments. We've had so many complaints about, why can't you do something about speeding? Why can't you make, the road safer? Here's a way that we're going to try to do. And because it gives us the opportunity to sort of evaluate it after a year, we can make some adjustments. I don't think we need a delay that would happen if we were going to have an open meeting.
I agree. Councilmember Kondo?
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. I was just going to ask for my understanding an open house would be kind of like a focus group, much like we did with the Looking Up North Glen thing. Is that kind of what you're
It would be
thinking?
more of a, here's what the program's gonna be, you can ask questions. It would be different than I view Looking Up, because Looking Up was, give us your feedback to contribute to the outcome. This would be, council's gonna move forward with adoption of the ordinance. This is more of an education, face-to-face with staff and any of you that wanna participate, that here's what the program's gonna look like. Do you have any concerns, and certainly we can hear those and see if there's things we can do to respond to them, but it's not a question of whether or not the program gets implemented.
So listening to that, my inclination is, I think that it would be sufficient, in my humble opinion, that we would just educate the populace through the ward meeting.
We can do that too. So in essence, I would take this off. And then you have all the other communication tools if you wanted to move forward that way. Additionally, you technically would have two public input opportunities through the ordinance process, so first reading, second reading. So if a resident is adamantly opposed and wants to share their input, they would have that option. So I'm gonna remove this, so no public, no town hall public meeting on this.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm
Everybody's on
seeing
board?
head nods, just wanna make sure. Okay, perfect. In terms of the program budget, as I mentioned, we're going to produce all the sign materials in-house, outreach materials in-house. The costs that we have which we can absorb within the current CIP budget, is the $10,000 per sign. 4 signs are recommended, 1 per ward, as Kent mentioned. And these are the radar flasher signs. We can absorb those within our budget, and so that's really the only cost, a direct cost to stand up the program. And then enforcement will be done in-house via the traffic unit. Any questions on that?
Councilmember Brown?
I'm sorry, I have a million. As far as the council goes, do we really, I would like to see the postcards that you were going to send out. I would like to see them go to all the residents, not just the ones that live in that area, because all of our residents go through, they go through the areas, you know what I mean? They're driving in and out. Is that overkill? Since there'll be a story in the connection?
Can you help me in terms of the cost with what it would take to do a citywide postcard mailing? Would we be able to absorb that in our budget? I think so. You think so?
So similar to how we do for your ward meetings, we could do mailing to your entire ward when it's about to roll out in that particular ward. I think doing it citywide for every single time we roll it out might be overkill, but we can do a connection article with an overall. And then instead of just doing the neighborhood ones that's near the zone, we'll do that whole ward for that zone. Does that seem reasonable, Becky?
First time out, yes, I do. 'Cause
Alright,
by the
sounds good.
time, a year later, when they're gonna put more streets on it, or if they're not gonna put more streets, they'll already know about it, you know?
Yeah.
So, yeah,
Makes
I'm
sense.
good the first time.
Okay, thanks for that feedback. Is that something council would like to see? Do I have consensus on? Okay.
Councilmember Condo?
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. Question, so the radar signs, are those bidirectional or no? It's just one side only?
And do you want to talk about how those work? That's outside my scope.
It's just one side.
Okay.
So we would pick which side of the street it would go on. The other side, you know, so say it was going northbound, we put it on the northbound side. The southbound side would not see it. But
Yes.
the zone is still there. Because it is
True.
signed.
True, okay.
The,
I got you.
the leading sign and the end signs are on both sides of the road. The data collection flashing sign is only on one.
One way, one
But
direction.
again, if we're collecting data for $10,000 a sign, we're duplicating the same data if it's on both sides of the road.
Okay, gotcha, thank you.
Okay, so that brings us to the conclusion of our staff presentation and the specific elements that we're looking for consensus on. If I may, I'll start off by saying we need to bring back the safety-sensitive zone areas to council in an additional meeting for further discussion and consensus before we move forward with the resolution on March 20th. I am hearing consensus on the draft safety-sensitive zone ordinance unless council tells me otherwise.
Councilmember Gall?
Oh, no, I was just, when you're finished. That's fine.
Okay, so yes on the draft ordinance, implementation timeline, less the change of bringing back the zone for that additional, the draft zones for that additional meeting. Okay. Good. Somebody watching Becky to make sure, sorry.
Councilmember Brown on board? Yep.
Okay. And then the community outreach plan with the tweaks that were recommended by council. Okay, that brings us to the end of the presentation. Anything additional?
I just wanted to say thank you to both Heather and all the staff, because this was very well thought out. I'm sure you guys spent many hours, like you said, in discussion and other things. Really appreciate this effort. I think we're going to have something that will be effective and make many residents.
We hope so too.
So
Thank
thank
you for that feedback.
Oh, Councilmember Walker?
You know, I've been very vocal about this, and I just wanted to say thank you too. This looks great.
You're welcome. Good. Okay, thank you.
I did want to add that Councilmember Lukeman Hiramasa says thank you as well. All right, next item on the agenda is the Crisis Response Unit update. Jessica Holst will present the update to council.
Good evening. Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem and council members for having me. My name is Jessica Holst, and I manage our crisis response unit here in North Glen. And the purpose of this presentation tonight is to provide City Council with the crew's quarterly update to council, as well as make a couple of requests. One is financial in nature, and two are regarding staff changes. So as a recap, in 2021, council approved the formation of the Crisis Response Unit. And that response unit has the mission to ease hardships for residents of the city of North Glen by aiding in police response and creating a path for self-advocacy through the use of an on-scene crisis response team, case management, and conflict resolution. And since then, we have been working diligently to provide the unit that we have in place right now. The first 6 months of 2022 was spent on forming policies and procedures with our police department, as well as maintaining our client database, our client formation base from our municipal courts, neighborhood services, and our self-referrals. And then it should say June of 2022, we started accepting referrals from the North Glen Police Department themselves. So when we formed Crew, we started using a software program called Unite Us. And that was in place by January of 2022, which allowed us to capture the number of clients we were serving, as well as some baseline case management. At the time, we really enjoyed that software. Through 2022, that software program is huge and usually has clients such as Kaiser Permanente, so much larger organizations. And they got rid of their case management portion since those large organizations were not using that feature. So that forced Crew into finding new case management. So that's why we will have some data for all of 2022, and then some data that we can go in more depth into as we've adopted our new software, which is called Apricot Social Solutions. So for our overall 2022 referrals, this is accurate. So these are our numbers for the entire year. We had 478 unique clients. Some of those clients transferred from participating in referrals from police department to returning and being a self-referral. Some of them were already self-referrals and then were again referred through our court system. So what this data captures is the very first time that the Crew had an interaction with an individual. As you can see through these numbers, self-referrals is our top referral source, so people referring themselves to the crisis unit, followed by our North Glen Police Department. And I want you to keep in mind, this North Glen Police Department is again only representative of 6 months, as we did not start taking referrals until June. So that 134 police referrals that we received was only June through December. Our municipal court referred 7 people to us initially, but we've had more than 7 court cases, as some of those court referrals were already a client of Crew, but I did not want to double count those people. And then in the community, because we do have quite a few community partnerships, the community has started making referrals, such as our school districts, SCL Hospital over on the corner of 120th and Grant. And sometimes City Council has written, because they've had a request from a ward member, so they've written to Crew or through Heather, asking us to kind of intervene and see if there's any help that we can provide that. So those are what we call our community referrals. So I wanted to give a picture of how Crew spends our time. Here we are, we have a whole unit, and we are fully staffed, which is wonderful. And how are we spending our time? So I took a snapshot of December, because this is where we can really start to dive into data due to our new software. And I was able to show the unique individual services that we are offering. Those are one-on-one sessions. So these numbers that you see are one-on-one sessions. I think that came out to 485 unique service sessions broken down into these different categories. So when we're saying case management, that's when I'm sitting directly across from a person providing case management, versus advocacy is when I'm contacting an organization on behalf of a person. If that one-on-one case management session really focuses on physical health, the person needs us to help them either attend a doctor's appointment with them or make a doctor's appointment on their behalf, then we further classify that beyond case management into a focus on physical health. The same as mental health and housing support. Street outreach is when Crew goes out we have a truck right now that we use that was given to us by our Parks Department, and we use that to do street outreach, and we'll go around E.B. Rains Park mostly, especially with our new Monday, Wednesday, Friday standing postings that we have for the Civic Campus. So Crew goes around every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday and engages with anyone who's been staying overnight in the parks. So that's what that street outreach number represents. And then research is sometimes our clients have such complex needs that we really start to get a whole history. And then on the back end, we're doing a lot of research. Where can this person be applying? What's appropriate? How can we make appropriate referrals to outside organizations? And so that's not always done face-to-face with the person. And I wanted to be able to capture that data as well, as it's time consuming. So we do capture that under the category of research. So this is really a snapshot of how Crew is spending our time. And then I also wanted to start to put together a snapshot of what outcomes are we seeing. So yes, we're spending a lot of time with people, but are we seeing outcomes? So these are the outcomes that we have tracked. And again, this is just for December due to that software change, which is allowing us to capture such data. We're really working on renewing benefits as acquiring benefits for clients. So people who have never had access to SNAP benefits or Medicaid benefits, that's stuff that we help work on. Connected resource, so that's our largest one. This is when someone has walked away with something tangible, or we have verified that an appointment was actually attended. So it's not just making an appointment and then saying, oh, they were connected. It's actually receiving news after that attendance was done that they went and met with this person. So if someone comes to us and says, I really need assistance getting down to Social Security so I can apply for my retirement. So that's going to be a connected resource with transportation if we provide it. And then if they go down to Social Security and we're able to have their needs met, that would be another connected resource. If they went to Social Security and their needs were not met, we would not consider that a connected resource because they were not connected with that source of support in their life. We were able to house or assist in housing 3 different individuals during the month of December. We matched 5 individuals through the housing program, so with a what's called an emergency housing voucher, and that's through a partnership with Metro Denver Homeless Initiative, which is the homeless provider for our region. And what that means is that person has been chronically homeless, which means that they have been experiencing homelessness for over 12 months during the past 3 years. That's what that requirement is. Helping people get their IDs and resolving legal issues was a big one. Resolving legal issues, what that can look like is if a person is moving into housing and they don't know how to sign their lease and we assist them in that signing of the lease, that's one way. If we attend court with someone and we help them get their motions passed or reconnected with a judge that they've been trying to meet with, that would also be a legal thing that was being addressed. And then finally, our SWAP program. I think everyone here knows, but I'll say it for the public that's watching. The SWAP program is the Severe Weather Activation Program, and that is where Adams County, along with Almost Home, a nonprofit in Brighton, work to connect people experiencing homelessness with hotel vouchers during severe weather. And that weather threshold has to be under 22 degrees without precipitation and under 32 degrees with precipitation. Active precipitation, not just counting snow on the ground.
Councilmember Kondo?
Yes, thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. First of all, great information here, so I appreciate that. My first question is housed, is that temporary or permanent housing, semi-permanent?
That's a great question. That was all permanent housing.
Okay.
Yep.
Good. And then on the legal issues resolved, is that the outcome of having Judge Bailhouse conduct community court? Is that what that is?
Yeah, some of those were. So I'll get into community court a little bit, but we did have 2 people work through their court requirements here in North Glen, and that was through the community court program, which was great, but not all of those. Other times it was signing legal paperwork or with Adams County Court as well.
Okay, gotcha, thank you.
Yeah.
And before I let you go, I had the opportunity to observe the resource room in action 3 weeks ago, I guess it was.
I think you've come twice, yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
And it was really illuminating. So thank you for all the hard work. It really does pay off, so.
Great, thank you. So back to the full year of 2022 data, we are looking at our housing outcomes. And in the past year, we have helped house 46 individuals. And the way that that breaks down is independent housing, just by themselves, they got themselves a job, and then we just assisted with helping them apply to various housing. That's just what independent housing is. There's 6 of those. Independent with a voucher. So that individual has been matched with some type of housing voucher, and there's a spectrum of housing vouchers. There's rapid rehousing, there's EHVs, and there's Section 8 housing vouchers. So one of those 3, each of those people, 16 individuals were matched with, and then we were able to leverage that into housing. 9 of our clients entered into transitional housing. That's typically a 2-year program in various different locations across Colorado. And then 15 of our clients was able to reunite with family members. That's not just family members in Colorado, but some people, we were able to track down family members across the country and get them reunited with their family members across the country as well. And we only do that when we have permission from the family on the receiving end that they have a place for this person to land, and it's legal and okay for them to be living with them. So one of the main tools that our crisis response unit uses is transportation. We use transportation when we respond to any of our North Glen Police Department calls, and that is because we do not want our cars to be associated with whatever is going on for people who track license plate numbers. And so our co-responders will always use the truck or ride with an officer when responding to those co-response calls with our police department. Also, when we are providing those civic campus rounds on Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays, we use the truck that you see in this photo, and that is because it has the safety light and it's clearly marked as a city vehicle, so it can go on those trails around EB Rains and back behind the rec center as well. We also use the truck when we are meeting clients at various services. And then one of the things to note is that this truck does not allow us to have clients in it. We are asked to not put clients in it. There are 2 seats up front and then a very small back seat. And so it's not really safe to have people experiencing various crises be riding side by side with the driver. Over the past year, this is one of my favorite things about Crew, is the community partners and working partnerships that we have grown. So if there is an organization in North Glen or even Adams County that work with people at risk, then we typically have a working relationship with them. Some of the highlighted ones are we sit on a every other week sheltering meeting that includes Almost Home. It includes members of our mental health agencies. It includes Adams County and outreach workers across almost every municipality. So that's a great working relationship we have. Crossroads Community Center with Chip. He's always seeing how he can be an involved community member, and so he is a great partner with the Crisis Response Unit, which we're very thankful for. Our food banks, we partner with them almost on a weekly basis, getting people their way. They also get people back our way as they highlight some of their members that might need some additional help that's beyond their scope. And then one that I'm really proud of as well is the M1 meetings that we sit on, and that's with Adult Protective Services. And we really got involved with them because so many of our clients are aging clients here or aging residents here in North Glen, and they just need some additional safety parameters built into their lives. And so we have frequent contact with APS. I'm happy to say a lot of our clients aren't living unsafe lifestyles, they just need supported lifestyles. So it's check-ins with APS, making sure that we're covering our bases, that they're covering their bases. But that's been a great relationship for us to have. Some of the extra activities, I didn't know how to word this slide, is we've started some extra things with the crisis response unit, in part because of our partnership. So as Councilmember Kondo was referencing, we have started community court, and that's with our municipal court. And this is for clients of our North Glen Municipal Court that are having a really difficult time meeting their court obligations and also have very low criminal charges, so trespassing being one of them. If their lifestyle is going to keep them in the cycle of continuously getting the same charges over and over again, then asking this person to pay a fine and completing community service it's not going to end that cycle. So when the community court highlights a court client that's coming through due to their living circumstances, they will refer them to community court. The person opts into community court knowing that they're going to be asked to start taking steps forward to end whatever is contributing to that cycle. And that's where our resource room comes into play. So once a month, the judge and the court supervisor comes over to the resource room and hosts community court. So throughout the month, they are referring people to community court, and then once a month, community court is hosted. We've seen 2 people go through community court and be successful so far. And one of those has been a client that I have known for almost 2 years, and they were very standoffish. They have mental health needs that are not being medically attended to, and they've always felt a little bit nervous to come in and engage in a system. When they were referred to community court, they were very receptive to it, and they started attending every Friday. And then we were able to get them matched with a housing voucher, and they move into their house in 2 days on the 1st. So that is a huge success story of community court, and it's only been going for 3 months. So that was wonderful, because it's been a difficult time with that one person until they had that external motivation. I did make a presentation the other night to the DICE board, and I was asked the question if there's ever the opportunity to not call it community court. And I don't think that will ever happen, partly because I said there's a feeling of success of moving through court. There is a feeling of success of knowing that you have had this kind of long-term need that you need to be addressing, and you don't know how, and you finally got through it. So even though you didn't get through it with a typical punitive case of fines and community service, you were still able to get through it, and the court is still celebrating you moving through the court system. So there is a really big feeling of satisfaction and success with that, and along with that comes pride, which that person should feel. And on the other end, if a person is not engaging in community court, they will be removed from community court and put back into municipal court. So it's not just an everlasting thing that someone is in community court. So far it's been a wonderful event, and the people who are engaged really do start to engage in community court. We were also able to host the documentary night, Us and Them. This was in partnership with Adams County, and we used the Parsons Theater to show a great documentary. It's called Us and Them, where it follows 4 different people who are experiencing homelessness over the course of 10 years, and you kind of get to see the outcomes. I thought it was a special night because the stories that they highlighted are true representations of what we see here in North Glen every single day. It wasn't something that was glamorized or found like the fringe of the people experiencing homelessness. It was a true representation, and that was pretty neat to see. Heather and I, we went to a dinner alongside City Council with the Board of County Commissioners to focus on homelessness, and that was a great conversation evening. Crew also sits on the Opioid Advisory Council with Chief. Chief May is a voting member, whereas Crew, we sit on just the advisory part of that committee. And then one thing that's not on here that I am really proud of, the Crews, we hosted an evening of community engagement for one of our apartment complexes that have seen a lot of violence. And it invited every single resident who lives in that apartment complex to come forward and have a night where they could engage in sharing their experiences of going through high crime area, and then as well as concerns, and get to know each other as a community. This was in partnership, our deputy chief came, Sergeant Shelley came, a couple of our officers came, as well as the property management team came. We only had 3 residents come. So it was a small showing, but each resident that had walked in was feeling pretty disillusioned and down on their community. And when they walked out, they felt better about where they were living in North Glen. So that was a big win, as well as the connection between the property management company and their residents, because they are always looking for ways to engage with their residents as well and receive some good feedback. So that was nice to see. And then we are also participating in the North Glen Police Department training. So that's been exciting. As we bring on new officers, we are asked to be there for their training. We're able to attend trainings with them. And then we are also able to go in and have them, before they do their FTO, their training officer week, their field training officer week, then they can come around with us. So last week, one new officer came around with us each day and just started engaging in public dialogue and getting to know the community, so that was pretty great. The new Civic Campus, I talked about that. That's in partnership with our Parks Department. So that was really a partnership between our Parks Department, the Crisis Response Unit, our maintenance team, and our park ranger, who is also part of our Parks Department. And so that's coordinated effort between 8:30 and 11 every Monday, Wednesday, Friday, to just make sure that our parks are being kept up, as well as people who are using the parks in unauthorized ways getting services to hopefully suggest that they don't do that anymore. And then finally, we're hosting our point in time count, which happens tomorrow. And Councilmember Kondo is going to be volunteering for that. Councilmember Lukeman Hiramosa also offered, but then was unable to due to some other reasons. But thank you both for jumping in there. Uh-oh, Heather, I turned it off. Oh, I got it back on. Okay. Good. Okay, so this brings us to our homelessness update. So the North Glen programs, you guys, I think, are pretty familiar with council is pretty familiar with them. We host our Friday office hours. That allows us to provide case management. Some of the programs we have brought in are the Colorado Legal Services, Community Court. We now have the DMV coming once a month to get people connected to their IDs on the spot. With the laundry and showers at Crossroads Community Center is still going every Thursday. We were also able to work with Human Services to bring in a second laundry service on Tuesdays. And then we are going to start helping staff the new Housing Navigation Center on Wednesdays, only for 3 hours. So people can come to Human Services and have a network of resources over there and get connected to housing, hopefully. And then finally, we also participated in the National League of Cities Capstone Project alongside the company Pallet, and that report will be presented to you at a later date. Local and future programs. Commerce City they have 2 safe parking spaces currently, and they're going to possibly bring in a navigation center that would benefit the county as well. And they're also looking at possibly bringing in a pallet shelter and identifying land to do so. Thornton is possibly going to be partnering with Together, which is a program in Boulder that offers youth people experiencing homelessness a transitional and supportive housing unit, as well as Thornton is looking at using a current hotel and partnering with a company called Bridge House in Denver to provide transitional housing in Thornton as well. And then Adams County is looking to purchase a hotel in tandem or in partnership with Denver County to provide permanent supportive housing. That is the Clarion Hotel off of I-25, just on Denver's side of the border. And Adams County is chipping in 8%, which means we will have access to 8% of the beds that are available in that unit. One question I get asked a lot, especially this winter, is what are we doing during the extreme cold? It has been a very cold winter. So extra things that we have done is, of course, we're always working to distribute swap vouchers whenever those are available. And then on those really, really bitterly cold nights, we provide bus tickets, bus passes to our police department, along with the map of local shelters. So if it's after hours and swap vouchers are no longer available, then they can still hook a person up with 2 bus vouchers so people can get to where they need to go and come back, because this is where their belongings are. And then the map to those sheltering spaces. We also keep our police department up to date on any pop-up warming shelters. For example, tonight, the City of Westminster is hosting one in one of their smaller rec centers. And so we keep them up to date on bed availability, because as close as Westminster is, sometimes our police department can provide courtesy rides over there as well. And then I'm also happy to report that so far, we've had no deaths due to cold weather in Adams County this year. And we did not have any last year either. The NLC Capstone Project, I've been talking about this probably for the past 8 months. It's coming to a close in end of February. Our presentation to the NLC is a virtual one, and that is going to be done on February 27th and 28th for that group. One of the outcomes of the North Glen Capstone Project is to present to you guys a consolidated report on what the findings were from the in-depth analysis that happened with the company Pallet. So Pallet has since provided a 50-page report that I will provide to council once it's complete, and provide you with a presentation as well with the findings. Another outcome will be a proposed presentation to the Board of County Commissioners, as well as the regional meetings with the city managers. The budget of the Crisis Response Unit has been at $64,861 for 2022, and that is our current operating budget for 2023 and our proposed budget for 2024, even though that has not been put forward yet. So I'm happy to say we stayed on budget for 2022. We will stay on budget for 2023, and we are, as always, are being funded through ARPA, and that ARPA funding lasts through the end of 2024. One financial savings we had was in 2022, we were slower to hire than we had thought that we were going to be. And so we did not spend all of our personnel budget in 2022. So there was financial savings in 2022. In 2023, we are fully staffed, so we expect to be on budget for our 2023 personnel budget. This brings me to a financial ask for the Crisis Response Unit. So we are requesting $35,205 of the ARPA funding to be allocated to the purchase of a hybrid Ford Escape, and that includes a passenger screen for safety. So when we're looking at various vehicles for the crisis unit, we did look at the EV vehicles. However, none of those come with the screen that would be needed for personal safety. Our police department, yes, chief is still here, but they will not allow us to transport anybody without that personal screen. It is outside of their comfort zone, and they are slowly making it outside of our comfort zone as well. So we are just not allowed to do it. So we do need a car, if we want to provide transportation to our clients, which would be a great tool, as we often attend things such as doctor's appointments, family meetings, mental health appointments. We go looking at apartment units and housing options with our clients. It's much easier to pop them in the car with us rather than schedule them a Lyft ride and for us to follow along behind, especially when we're house hunting, because that can be a full day and pretty costly using Lyfts and Ubers. So the other thing that we did look at was using 2 of the upcoming decommissioned police cars. So 2 of our police cars are up for decommission. They both need some repairs and expenses and repairs. They both have over 130,000 miles on them, and they are both, I think, over 6 years old. Both of those would need to have the police extras removed from those cars and have full decals done as well. None of those cars are a hybrid, meaning that in a couple of years from now, crew would be needing to request to replace those cars at a time when ARPA funding most likely would not be available to us. And if we request the car right now, using the funds that we did not use last year would set us up for many, many years of not needing another car request. And so we would have a hybrid model that fit our needs and would be safe to drive and would be looking at little expenses in repairs.
We have a couple questions. Councilmember Walker?
Ms. Jessica, I believe you, thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. Believe you touched on, I was kind of curious of what our fleet situation was. Do we have any, I know there's quite a few vehicles out there, but I just want to ask for the public too, do we have any other options beside a new vehicle? I have no idea what our fleet status is right now.
We don't.
Okay.
Yeah, staff looked at that. If we did, we would definitely, we wouldn't be making the ask.
Yes, ma'am.
And I did have a conversation with Jason. This is outside of the normal budget cycle. And because ARPA dollars would be utilized and they are available, I think that's more of an appropriate ask outside of the normal budget cycle than when you see that full fleet replacement come through on an annual basis.
Okay, thank you so much.
Councilmember Brown?
I actually think that Heather may have tapped on my question because that was my question. Why wasn't this at least brought forward at budget time? The ARPA money doesn't necessarily exclude it from being considered in the budget, does it?
It doesn't, the other piece is that it wasn't identified as a need at that point in time. This program's evolving, and now that Jessica and crew is fully staffed, she's brought this up as a more significant need. And knowing that you've got the safety piece to this vehicle different than other vehicles, that's another consideration as well. So I think, my preference would be to always bring forward vehicles through the annual budget cycle. But because of the success that we're seeing and the results of this program, I was comfortable bringing it forward. In addition to that, it's ARPA funded, so it's a different revenue source than the general fund.
Okay, I'll let you get away with it this time.
That brings us to our next request. So looking at our staffing, so crew is fully staffed, which has been fantastic. We have, I think that we hit our staffing out of the park. It's really incredible, the team that we're working with every day. They are engaged, they are passionate, they're really dedicated to making decisions best on crew. So that's navigating what's best for the city as well as what's best for clients. They are dedicated to working across a lot of different city departments, and they are always brainstorming on how to make it better. We actually have 2 of our staff members who are going back to school just because they're inspired by the work. And so on top of their full-time work, they are also going back and taking extra classes that complement the work that they're doing here in City of North Glen, which has been exciting. So right now we have myself as a program manager, and as you guys know, I'm a licensed social worker, so that's my title, my professional title. We have Lacey DeMars, and her background is bachelor's in behavioral science, and as well as 6 years, I believe, of experience responding in communities alongside fire as well as mental health. We have Jamie Sledowitz, who also has a background in behavioral health, as well as background in managing shelters and doing mobile response up in Greeley with mental health. We have Tristan Reyes, who is going to be a licensed addiction counselor in about 6 months from now, and he is also an LSW, so a licensed social worker. So both he and I are working on that clinical designation, so licensed clinical social worker. And then we have Nicole Mayers, who has her bachelor's degree in psychology and her master's degree in criminal justice. And then she also comes from a background of case management of many years. So I want to say that because one of the one of the things we've been able to do over the past year is after our presentations to Colorado Municipal League, ICMA in Ohio, and then with independent cities who are looking to grow a program like this, one of their constant questions is, do you hire licensed staff? And what that question is getting its baseline in is, what can you do? What are your legal obligations to the city? And what are the things that you can provide for the city? And right now, Crew cannot write M1 holds. That's the number one question. Can you write a mental health hold alongside that police department? Right now, we cannot. And that was analyzed when we looked at the formation of Crew, if that was a need that we needed. At first, we put it in as a requirement with our co-response. And when you do that, you're really limiting the number of people that you can hire. And as I've talked to other co-response units, you're also getting a limited scope. So a lot of licensed clinical staff are used to working in an office setting. They're not working in crisis intervention. They've moved beyond crisis intervention, and they're now having one-on-one case management sessions. That is very different than what crisis intervention is. And so when we looked at why we were doing that, it was just the one reason, which was to be able to write an M1 hold. We did not need to write M1 holds at that time because we were always going to be responding with a police officer who can always sign off on it. There's new state legislation that says if an officer is going to write an M1 hold and they have a crisis unit available to them, they must call that crisis unit out to consult with them. It does not say that that crisis unit has to write the M1 hold for them. So we're constantly staying on top of the license recommendations that go along with a crisis intervention team. So right now, we have 2 of us that will be able to write those M1 holds in the next 6 months to a year, but it was not built with that intention in mind. So I say that because one of the roles of the co-response team is to go out with the police department when they're doing that analysis. And our co-response, our community resource navigator position was not written to do that. They were written to have an office job where they really were to meet with people experiencing homelessness and case manage from an office setting. That person has since moved over to the police department and more is growing into the role of a co-responder because she is the expert in homeless matters. So when our officers are out on the streets and they know Nicole is sitting in the office, they will call her out on the radio and say, can you come consult on this with me? And so that has been moving our community resource navigator into much more of the role of what a co-responder is. When we are looking at the pay grades, and the employee grades of the community resource navigator to the co-response, they're in different levels. And so what I'm asking is that we reclassify the community resource navigator position into a 4th co-responder position, as those duties have grown out of what we had originally said was going to be a community resource navigator, and they are now more fitting of a co-responder. So that's what this request focuses on.
We have a couple questions.
Sure.
Councilmember Brown?
Councilmember Brown, you're
I'm saying,
muted.
hang on. Heather, you know what I'm going to say, right? I mean, we're bringing salary information in after we've done the budget. And I don't mean to sound snarky, but I am kind of snarky right this minute. We did the budget. How come? I'm sure we can sidebar it as to why this wasn't all wrapped up at the original ask. And I guess my other question is, how come on the slides back where the salaries are excluded from the amount of your operational cost, which is not really the case? It could have been explained differently.
Mm-hmm.
Why is the total salary allotment never mentioned on this, what we have invested in this team? I think you're doing a great job, but now we're talking money, you know? And I do, Jessica, I thank you from the bottom of my heart for everything you did for us last week. But it irks my belly button just a little bit that it is January and we're already going to do a supplemental budget request, and this stuff wasn't brought to us last year. Not that it would have made a difference, but and I know it doesn't seem like a lot of money, but it is a lot of money to me.
Yeah.
Because we're trying to come back and I'm looking at it on my other screen. I apologize. I don't have a problem with the concept. I have a problem that my mindset now, we've gotten past budget. My mindset went to, we're not going to spend any more money that's not an emergency funded or isn't funded through our budget. And then, okay, hang on. And then now, in my opinion, two significant asks in one day. So I guess what I'm looking for is what the total salaries and all that is for the team that we have there now. And I see that it's she's asking for another 38,000 and then 6,500, so another 45,000. 44. So the
So-
car's
Yeah.
then 38 and then another 6.5, right?
Right, so the one overarching piece to remember with Crew is it is funded, council made a commitment to fund Crew through the end of 2024. That's when ARPA dollars are no longer coming to the city. So council's commitment to fund Crew in total is the approximately $1.3 million. That's of that $9.7 million amount, council said, we're gonna invest 14% of our ARPA dollars into Crew. So all of these two additional asks are within that ARPA allocation, not above the 14%. It's within that 14%. So the conversations I had with Jason was, are we on track with our budget for Crew using ARPA dollars? And he has assured me that we are. So ARPA being a different revenue source than general fund dollars, I agree with what you said, Councilmember Brown. With Crew, I believe it was 2 budget cycles ago, not the 2023 cycle, but the 2022 cycle, council did ask if we were asking for enough. And at that point, we didn't have the information, we didn't have the results to demonstrate that we needed more. So when Jessica shares the next slide, which shows the coverage over the week, and you can see how gaps that exist today are being filled in through that additional 0.5 FTE increase. I think, again, it goes back to we're driving results and outcomes with this unit. And so I'm not asking council to go above the 1.3. I'm asking to stay within, but we didn't have these two needs identified through the budget cycle. So I hear you loud and clear on that concern. I also would not be bringing forward these two requests if I didn't feel strongly that the unit needs them and that could continue to be successful by having them. But certainly understand if council says, no, then those monies will not be utilized. And at the end of 2024, if the 1.3 million becomes less than 1.3, then that's funding that's unused. So we also have to be careful about that. We want to use every ARPA dollar that's allocated to us.
2024, we won't have any more ARPA dollars. You heard me, ARPA dollars. So then it becomes an expenditure of the city to continue the project.
It does in 2025. So as we approach, when we get into the 2025 budget cycle, that will be funding both, it will be funding on the expenditure side, that council will be faced with a decision, do you want to continue to fund Crew?
I just, I don't know why. I do know why it's bothering me so much. You know how I am. And I would have liked to have seen the total salary as an operating expense rather than just whatever that 64,000 represents.
You
Is
have
that
your ballpark salary dollar. Go ahead and share that.
Yeah, so when we wrote it, it was, our personnel salary for Crew unit was $440,000 per year. We are on track to spend that for 2023. Like I said at the beginning, we did not spend that in 2022.
that's a great thought, Jessica, but you don't get to do that. It's not how it works. You don't spend it, you lose it in that year. But I do get your point. Okay.
Well, Councilmember Brown, I do want to emphasize though, you're right. If you don't spend money in a fiscal year, it doesn't carry forward. You're absolutely right. The thing about ARPA dollars is if we have funds allocated and we don't spend it, that's what I mean by if we don't spend the 1.3 million, then we don't get to keep the 1.3 million unless we allocate it to some other ARPA eligible project.
Right.
So that's why when Jason and I have these conversations and I get his thumbs up of, yeah, go ahead and I support purchasing a vehicle, I support the additional 0.5 FTE. It does though create on the back end of it and for 2025, the conversation that council has to have about whether or not you want to continue the program. So I understand and hear your feedback.
I do want to add that that's one of the reasons why we are making that request of the car now, because we do have, I know I'm not supposed to go back and look at funding that we did not spend. However, it is there. And if we don't ask for it through ARPA, then in a couple of years, if crew is continued through general dollar budgets, then it would become an ask of the city.
Yeah, I totally get it, Jessica. I'm trying to pinpoint in my own mind what irritates me about this, and it's not going to change my opinion. You know what I mean? I am all for anything you need. I just don't like the way that it was brought forward, and that's nothing on your case, okay? But yet I have been kind of grumpy today.
Thank you.
Councilmember Kondo?
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. Would like to just offer an anecdote. I went on a ride-along on Saturday, single-digit temperatures for about 8 hours from 6 until 2 a.m. And so I had the opportunity to see Mr. Reyes, Tristan Reyes in action. And during that 8-hour period, I would estimate that I think I went on 7 or 8 different calls. But during that window, and oh, by the way, Tristan is not available for the entire grave shift. He only ends his watch at about 10 o'clock. He was called out to on scene 2 of those 7 times. So that's about 28% of the time. I think there was another case there where a police department victims advocate was called out. So 3 out of 7 times, that's 42%. And he doesn't ride with the police. He has to go in a different vehicle. Because, you know, when you're riding around on patrol, you're cruising around and you're hanging out, just ready. And also doing directed patrols and doing all these other things and stopping people who aren't stopping for stoplights. So I get it. I understand why there's a need for a vehicle, because you don't want to take your personal vehicle out to a scene. I wouldn't. And then the other thing that really struck me was, okay, yeah, when you look at the coverage schedule on slide 21, you know, the current status, there's gaps. And I was just at the police department for 8 hours. And, you know, if something happened after 2 a.m. in the morning that required a crew person, they don't have that coverage. So, you know, I really feel strongly about what your recommendation is to be able to provide greater coverage. And also the vehicle to be able to help those people get onto the scene.
Thank you.
Councilmember Gall?
Thank you, Mayor. I just wanted to say that the residents often, I don't know how many times, have expressed concerns around people experiencing homelessness. So this program has just been amazing in terms of the effect it has had in helping that population. And, I can see it in some ways, it's like the more successful it gets, the more you discover what you need or what you can do. And so doesn't really, upset me or whatever that this is coming out of order, because it sounds like you guys have really been planning and thinking through, in a couple of years, you're going to need another vehicle. And I know we're going to have to talk about how to fund this when ARPA money runs out. But it's so successful, I just can't imagine there's not going to be funding somewhere. State, mental health is a big concern. So I am in support of this request. I think it would be well put.
Thank you.
Councilmember Lukman Hiramasa.
Yay, I'm back. I'm going to take advantage while I'm here. I apologize. I've had the worst technical difficulties. Technology hates me today. But I'm so happy I get to say something. I just want to say that I am also in support of this. I mean, I understand all the great points that, Councilmember Brown brought up because, we do have to think about that. But I think now is the time that while we can use ARPA funds, because we are trying to figure out if this is a program that will be viable, in 2025 when we have to take a good hard look at it. So I support giving the crew team all the tools they need to be able to show and prove that this is a viable program. If they don't have all the tools, then we won't quite know how those pieces fit together. And then the second part is I also was able to attend one of the resource days, and I would highly recommend if any of the council members have some time, I know it's time consuming, popping in or whatever. And I got to sit next to Jessica and literally see her at work, which is why I can't say no to anything that she's asking for right now, because there was a huge need. Like, I was incredibly blown away by the amount of folks that went in there. And for those that are watching, these are absolutely not handouts. What the crew is doing is literally making a difference with these individuals coming in, truly focusing on the connections that they need. And I just can say I was blown away. That movie, Us and Them, that Jessica referred to, how it kind of correlates to the folks that come into our resource center. We had seen that movie literally like the day or two before, and it really did shock me. Some of the stories that I heard sitting next to her were kind of mirroring, and people who literally ended up in a situation where you can't judge. So what we do is important. What Jessica does is important. And that was really long and winded, probably because I didn't have a chance to talk for the last hour. But I just want to say I do support it while we can to really make sure that they have the tools they need. That's all I got. Thank you. Before I disappear again.
Thank you.
All right, I know you have one more slide before your recommendations.
Yeah, so I'll go on to the slide that Councilmember Kondo referenced, and that is slide 21. And this is another financial request. So this one looks at our staffing, and I know, and I thank council for asking me to reevaluate that when we're forming crew. And we have great coverage right now, as in 7 days a week. What I did not anticipate was the number of police callouts on Mondays and Fridays that encompass the entire day. So from right now on Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, we are covered from 8 in the morning through 9:30 p.m., which has been great. That change also came when the shift changes came with our police department. It used to be 8 in the morning till 10 p.m. But it actually is more impactful for crew to have double coverage more of the time, because we can go out to more calls that way and have officers leave us on scene, because then we have 2 people there. And then right now we are covered midday Saturday. So as Councilmember Kondo indicated, Tristan comes in around 10 o'clock in the morning, noon, and stays until around 10. So that's more midday. And if he knows that there's anticipated need on a Sunday during certain hours, then he'll adjust those Sunday hours to match that. So he always comes in on Saturday, that 12 to noon, or 12 to 10, and then we'll adjust while working with the officers on Saturday to meet the needs for Sunday. So what our proposed staffing is to keep Tristan on those Saturdays and Sundays the way it is, and then also bring him on full-time, so we will have that full coverage on Mondays and Fridays, as well as Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. So that would be increasing Tristan, not a pay raise, but bringing him on from 0.5 to a full-time FTE. And he already has a benefit, so that does not impact the benefits package that's already provided to him. So that brings me to our staff recommendation. So we are looking for council consensus on the vehicle budget request, as well as the reclassification of the CRN to a co-responder request, as well as the 0.5 to a full-time FTE request. And all funding would come from ARPA.
Sounds good to me.
No more discussion? Everybody okay?
Wonderful. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
Yeah.
All right, the last item on our agenda is the comprehensive plan final draft. Brooke Svoboda will introduce the item.
This is where I get to talk short and sweet because I'm not doing the big dog and pony tonight. Good evening, Mayor Pro Tem and Council. I'm very excited to be here tonight to tee off this conversation on the comp plan. We are at the end of this journey and very happy to be here presenting to you. I'm going to hand this over to Sarah Dusenberry, our senior planner, and then at the very end, after we wrap up, I'm going to just have a few closing comments that I want to share with the council as well. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to Sarah. Also, we have Becky Smith, the planning manager. She's here tonight, as well as she's been a co-project manager on this. So, okay, thank you.
Good evening, everyone. Starting off, so kind of as Brooke mentioned, just really wanting to get any kind of final comments and review of the final draft goals and policy and wanted to present the kind of final design document. Most of the goals and policies that were included in the memo and the plan itself have not shifted a ton since November, so hopefully this will be pretty quick and I'll just kind of highlight if there's been some changes. Quick overview, just another update on public engagement, discussion of the plan structure, and then the various components in the plan. For public engagement, we were able to attend about 19 different community events since July 2021 through October 2022. We worked with a variety of different community groups, groups like NURA and Citizens Advisory Board. In terms of our website, we updated the numbers a little bit, had about 2,500 unique users, nearly 1,400 survey responses, and map exercise responses, and that's in addition to the public input that we received at the events and at meetings. In terms of the plan structure, really wanted to kind of hit that balance between concise and comprehensive. So included 4 different sections looking at kind of an introduction, letting people know what the plan is, what the purpose is, and then kind of our process for developing it. The then and now section is really about providing context, so looking at the history of our community and then where we're at today. For community vision, that's really the big kind of meat of the plan. That's the goals and policies for the various sections and kind of the roadmap for the 20-year plan. And then areas of focus and future planning is really looking at kind of that land use side of things and our sub-area planning as well as prioritization. So starting with the community vision, I won't read it word for word, that's a lot on the screen, but it was developed by the resident task force and is supposed to be kind of, once you hit that 20-year mark, what is that vision of the community? So it's really built on what Northglenn already is and just wanting to expand it. So taking note that we are a small city while contextualizing it within the greater metro region, noting that we're providing for the quality of life and safety of our residents, celebrating the diversity in our community, as well as making sure we can provide a resilient, equitable future for our residents.
Councilmember Kondo?
Yes, thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. So being fairly junior, not having that long arc, and I really think this is the money slide that you had up there, that the real core of this. Did it change a lot from the previous version, or is it?
The community vision? No,
Yeah.
so it was pretty much developed at the beginning and it kind of acted as that road, as the kind of guidepost of all the recommendations are what lead you kind of to this vision. So we developed, was the first thing we did. We developed it with the resident task force as well as brought it before the planning commission and city council. I believe prior to you sitting on city council. But yeah, it just was really kind of outlining what we hope the community grows to be.
So is it consistent with the prior version, I guess? Does it seem like there wasn't really too much radical change here?
No, yeah, no change to
Okay.
it on the prior version, yeah.
Very good. Well, sounds like we're on the mark, so that's good.
Great. Looking at the land use goals, really for land use, wanting to make sure that our developments are pedestrian and environmentally friendly while strengthening those commercial centers and celebrating the characteristics of Northglenn that our residents hold dear. So for the first kind of goal, this is our first slight change, a little bit change in nomenclature. It used to say areas of change. We switched it to areas of focus to just better encompass kind of what that future sub-area planning is. So those areas that we've noted, and I'll get into a little bit later, are kind of areas that we want to further study. So focus made a little bit more sense. Change felt prescriptive that something absolutely was going to happen. This is just kind of our opportunities to study and understand future uses. Again, pedestrian-focused development, environmentally sustainable, and strengthening our commercial centers. None of these goals shifted since last time you saw them. Neither has water resources, efficient and responsible use of our water, as well as continuing to maintain and even upgrade our infrastructure. Looking at transportation, really taking that multimodal approach, wanting to make sure that all forms of transportation are safe and convenient for our residents. The only shift here is we expanded on goal 1. It initially said electric vehicles. We just expanded it to include any potential sustainable gas alternatives, since those are likely to be coming on in the next 20 years, and that multiple options are probably going to be the solution. So didn't want to kind of strangle us into one thing, wanted to leave it open. But the rest of them stay the same, focusing on safety, public transit, as well as pedestrian travel. For public safety, want to make sure that we're kind of building on this our community-based approaches, really making it a community effort, while also noting that public safety is not just the purview of the police. It's a community citywide effort. So wanting to kind of call out certain things like natural and man-made hazards, working with crew, again, our community-based approaches, providing for the needs of our unhoused residents, and then looking at appearance and condition of neighborhoods as a function of safety as well. And those goals haven't shifted since November. Looking at community health, this is really about breaking down those barriers for our residents to be able to have a healthy and active lifestyle and really just improving quality of life. This is probably the most diverse and various kind of topics that the goals hit. Community health is a very broad subject, so looking at food access, connectivity throughout the city, looking at our air quality, healthy homes even, and then looking at mental health as well as making sure that we're resilient against the greatest risks of climate change. Looking at parks and recreation, this goal hasn't shifted. It's really there. We decided to kind of just reaffirm and support the parks master plan. Since that is such a robust plan, instead of kind of duplicating things, we felt that the comprehensive plan's role was to support that and kind of support it. Sorry, I couldn't think of that. Different word.
Councilmember Kondo?
Yeah.
Yes, thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. I'm just curious, and I'm sorry, if we can go back to the prior one about the community health goals. I was really struck by the graphic on the bottom, page 40, where it shows there's quite a few people with diabetes. And I don't know, do we use tools like Esri's, ArcGIS, and are we able to compare ourselves relative to the health of other cities comparable to our size? Is that something that eventually will be a follow-on step from this process? So we can figure out, are we having, food deserts, so to speak?
Right.
Is that kind of what will be the outcome of this activity, I hope?
Yeah, so that graphic specifically was actually taken from a state tool that, so we were able to narrow it down to specifically Northglenn, but could definitely be a tool to help with that comparison. In terms of kind of assessing where we're at in terms of food deserts and things, we're building off of a lot of work that we've completed and can further kind of, I think, update would warrant. So a lot of these plans are looking at kind of understanding the health of our community, where we can improve it. We had a fairly close relationship with Tri-County. I'm assuming it will continue with Adams County Health Department as well, and work with them as much as we can to make sure that we can kind of assess our community's health and improve it. I'm trying to think of specific ones that were policies, but we would be looking at kind of building on the work we've already done. We have a few plans that are slightly older that we could look at maybe see if there's any need to update, but just kind of furthering the, improving the health of our residents through that, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it's really interesting. You know, I'm looking at Ward 1, for example, and you're lighter orange, so you have 7.3 to 8.8% of your people are diagnosed with diabetes. But yet, you know, you look at other places and it's up to 25%, which is very consistent, actually, I think, with the national average of diabetes, maybe a little bit on the high end. So it causes me to think about, you know, have we designed the city to have all those sort of amenities or access to good food, places where people can walk around and get exercise? Because, you know, clearly we all know that diabetes is an epidemic in the United States. And so trying to help people live the right lifestyle so they can better manage that chronic disease.
Absolutely. And I know that there are definitely policies that look at that connectivity throughout the city, as well as, I think, based on for the previous research in terms of food deserts, I think came online that we had a new source, so we probably don't have a food desert, but looking at working with convenience stores and other convenient options for healthier foods is a policy that's in there, because just because there's access doesn't mean that it's the absolute kind of best quality. So there is a policy, I believe, of looking at kind of working on in terms of that and making sure that access is there for all residents.
Okay, great, thank you. Apologies for the detour, I just,
You're good.
health is something that is my hot button issue.
Gotcha. Awesome. And then, yep, Parks and Rec just reaffirming the study. And then for housing, the goals haven't shifted either. As you know, they're predominantly based on the recommendations from the housing needs assessment, and are really looking at retaining our residents, diversifying our housing type to really accommodate all needs, and then looking at improving that affordability for our current residents. So for areas of focus, this is probably where the most has shifted. Starting with number 1, section 36, we've added that in, and we've recommended, or the task force recommended industrial or commercial, just kind of based on its proximity to the wastewater treatment plant. They felt that those are probably the best kind of areas of uses. The reason for prioritizing it as number 1, with water service being potentially out there now and it being the last kind of major undeveloped property in the city, it seems like a very good opportunity right now to kind of go ahead and start looking at it and set us up for what could go there. 2 and 3, still the marketplace, haven't shifted. 4 through 7 have shifted some in terms of number 4 and 7 were actually combined at one point. It was the area along 112th Irma to the end line, and then the west side of Irma Drive. Based on discussion with NURA as well as the resident task force, they felt splitting it up would make more sense, since NURA is kind of moving forward with that area along 112th, prioritizing that higher, but not necessarily sinking 5 and 6 too low, so wanting to keep them kind of up in the mix, and then separating out the west side since it's a little bit different in terms of how it's used and location, and again, NURA priority. They felt that kind of pulling that out and just having that as a separate area made a lot of sense as well. One other thing to note with the Huron Center, there wasn't absolute 100% consensus. The majority felt that mixed-use regional still made the most sense. The concern was just the shift. Huron Center is a little bit farther away than Marketplace and the rest of commercial. That's right along I-25 and 104th. One thing that is helpful to note is that with the sub-area planning, we are going to be looking at capacity and its impact on surrounding areas. So if mixed-use regional is found to be too impactful, we can always look at other tools. So that was kind of where they came to, but I just wanted to share that there was some mixed consensus on that one. And then the rest of them have stayed the same. And then finally, for the approval process, we're going to the Planning Commission for their approval at a public hearing on February 21st, and then hopefully bringing it back to y'all on the 27th for final adoption. But that is all I've got.
Councilmember Brown?
Hi, Sarah. I'm hiding over here in the TV. This is great. A lot of information. Luckily, I have it memorized from the last 7 years, but you did a really good job on this and I appreciate it. Thank you.
Councilmember Kondo?
Yeah, I'd like to echo what Councilmember Brown just said. I actually participated, or at least observed, one of the focus groups, and I think that the engagement was really, what can I say, it was very robust, very in-depth.
Thank you.
So bravo for really listening to the voice of our residents.
Doesn't look like we have any more questions. I would just echo what others have said, and you guys are the experts, and a lot of work has been put into it. Looks great.
Thanks.
So I'm just going to wrap up with a few closing comments on this, because this is a very monumental thing. As what we've talked about in previous meetings, we typically do this project every 5 to 7 years per state statute. And as you can probably tell, we're behind the curve on that, and that's partly because of COVID. But I just want to also just reiterate for the council is that this is essentially the same content you've already seen. We're just putting it in a final package. We're making our final run. This is that opportunity for you to go, hey, opportunity to sort of say, what about this and what about that? So we just as Sarah's outlined on the schedule here is that we've got the plan commission, then we come back to you to come back. They have a public hearing, and then we come back to you for final ratification. I would just want to emphasize this voice of the community, and really that what you guys are doing is confirming and ratifying that voice as a reflection of what this effort is. And I want to recognize the fact that this city council has been very intentional about making sure that the staff was serving the task force as well as our neighborhood champions to get this message out and to brand this as their ownership of this. And what we try to do is keep them within the bumpers as far as policy statements go, and really trying to shape that into a format that you now see in front of you today. A couple of other things. This has been a comprehensive effort throughout the stakeholder departments, throughout the city. We've had some great, healthy conversations about what we're doing and why we're doing it and how that overlaps and doesn't. The other thing I also just don't want to let go of here is that despite COVID and despite all the setbacks that we had, the innovation that we've done with community outreach through this exercise is truly new and groundbreaking for any size community. And when you look at 2,500 unique visitors on a planning project anywhere is pretty amazing. So I would say that one of the things I just am saying this for councils is that we heard you when we started this process. This is really a reflection in my mind to recognize and just sort of take a victory lap for council that this worked. And that when we think about when we're making future decisions and we look back on this and questions come up, we can honestly say to the public and to the council, we did get the input that we were looking for. You know, does it meet everyone's expectations and checks a box? Maybe not, but I will say it is unprecedented in my years of experience to see this type of engagement on this size of community with what we saw on social media as well as what we did out in the public. This has also been an in-house effort. We originally had a $250,000 budget for this project, and as you see in the staff report, we did it for basically under $100,000, and that was largely going to all these efforts for pop-ups and the things that Sarah's done. And you know, lastly, when you look at the old plan and this new plan, we checked a lot of boxes in that old plan. This is the planning department's work plan of carrying out council's vision. So as we move forward, you're going to see us bring forward recommendations to do the additional efforts that you see in areas of focus. And as we do those efforts, we're going to be looking to as what Sarah suggested as the guidepost of all those goals and objectives and how we're meeting those as we go through that exercise. And then lastly, I do want to recognize Sarah. I mean, she has done an amazing job in this effort, and Becky has been there to help support her. I'm there to sort of, be the cheerleader and rah-rah, but really I want to just recognize that this has been a huge effort largely for a single individual to put forth such a document and stay with it for the amount of time that we have through all these challenges with COVID. So I just wanted to finally just give that recognition to her because this has been a monumental effort. Thank you.
Councilmember Goff?
Thank you. Just a quick comment. I did want to say thank you to everyone that worked on this. That's quite a document. Lots of good information. But you mentioned the neighborhood champions, and so at some point I would be curious to find out like how successful that program was, And I want to thank the people who were neighborhood champions for us. And, just see if we might want to, repeat that type of a program in the future.
Absolutely. And I do believe that they were recognized. We gave out gift cards, is that correct? So I can have Sarah come back up and weigh in on that if you like. I think overall, it's definitely something that we want to try to utilize as a future tool for community engagement. Do you want to add anything?
Yeah, it was definitely a bit of a learning kind of curve with it and kind of when to deploy them and when to not. So it definitely, I think Becky and I would have loved for them to be a little bit more kind of successful in the effort. We definitely got some good feedback from them. We had 2 individuals that were able to kind of stick through the entire process. We would like to kind of continue to use that same concept when we look at the sub-area plans as well as kind of future neighborhood planning, which is kind of mentioned as one of the policies. Because I think working on that smaller, more concentrated level, I think will actually be even more successful than kind of a full citywide. We can kind of guide them a little bit more. And learning when to fully deploy them, I think is the big key. So they definitely gave us some good feedback, but wanting to kind of grow it in the future, because I think it's a really great tool to kind of have your residents talk to other residents and provide that comment there and feel more comfortable talking to your peers maybe than even someone at a community event, so.
Okay, great, thank you.
No problem.
Councilmember Jaramillo?
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. Just want to thank you, Sarah, and all the staff for all the hard work. Just one question I have is with the, now that we have Carl's Farm coming together, the entire space there, I noticed that the very north part is parks and open space, and it is where, well, it's dried up now, but it used to be East Lake #1. I was wondering if there's gonna be any plans to make that a park for the new community that's being built there. If there's any plans to,
So that's actually City of Thornton-owned property. So we don't control it. It has been identified in the Parks and Recs Master Space Open Plan as a potential future park area. There is a very large or significant park being proposed inside of Carl's Farm that is going to have a little bit of a historic heritage component to it and recognizing the historical uses on the property. But that area right now is controlled by Thornton, and they have, we've attempted to engage them on stuff, but there's really been no direction on that at this point.
oh, that's interesting, just since it, states on the map here, it has it in that light green color.
That's correct. We've identified it as a potential future open space area, but Thornton controls it, and so we don't have a lot of say in what they do and how they, and when they would participate with us on that.
And that's interesting that they control it, even though it's in north.
It's an old, as it's recognized as an old reservoir as part of their water augmentation. And then once they abandon that, they just let it go fallow, and so we've just always identified it as open space.
Okay, I just see potential there.
Absolutely.
And, with the lack of space that we have, and then especially in Ward 2, it's all residential. As much parks and open, fun amenities that we can bring to the community, the better, so darn. Okay, thank you.
For now.
For now, okay, well, I believe in you guys.
Councilmember Lukman Hiramasa?
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. I would love to say thank you, Sarah and the whole team, because this is quite incredible. It's so detailed, but I just wanted to kind of reinforce the fact that this literally it sounds like our community. It's every person that I've talked to at ward meetings, at different events. Their concerns, their hopes and dreams for the city, things from like the pocket parks and community gardens and farmers markets and even street furniture, which I had to learn about, and public safety, like all of these things. It's like I'm hearing the voices of our residents. So I think you did such a great job in gathering all that information. So thank you.
Thank you.
Councilmember Conda?
Yes, thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. So my only comment, it sounds like maybe I might have caught on to this or I didn't, but are we going to stay in touch with these community champions? Because I know that there were other things that we were exploring late last year, like the pay to throw away. And that was just my epiphany. It's like, wow, if we already have these people that have collaborated with us, it seems like it's a great opportunity or resource to be able to get feedback on other citywide initiatives.
Absolutely. I would also suggest that we're going to reach out to our task force and to our neighborhood champions and invite them to the public hearing and/or to the city council ratification, just to be recognized for their effort when we get to that step.
Awesome, thank you.
I don't see anything else.
All right, thank you very much.
Thank
Appreciate
you.
that.
All right, that was the last item on our agenda. Are there any other items for council? Hearing none, we are adjourned.
All right. Thank you, everyone.
Congratulations on your first meeting.